everybody, this is Cheri at djsundry.blogspot.com, and I have a special post for you today and for the 3 Girl Jam blog. But this is a special anniversary card for my husband. On January 1st, we celebrated our 23rd wedding anniversary. And I wanted to make him a special card. And I had my Valentine's papers out, and I found a pad that I had forgot that I had, and I was really excited to have found it, and because it's one of my favorite Valentine's paper pads from last year, and I thought it would make a perfect anniversary card. So I'm going to share with you what I used, and then I'll do a card share. This card kind of evolved as I went, and so I don't have a tutorial, but I'll do the share and tell you what I did. So I had this sticker set from Echo Park, and it's called the Yours Truly set by Cassandra Cooper, and I used a couple of things on here. If you look at the bottom, we have these kind of typeset letters. I used some of those, and then there were some strips, like word or phrase strips here, and I used those as well. And actually, I see another one here that I may use on the back, so I'm just going to set that aside, and I'll show you where I'm going to use that in a minute. So I used that sticker set. And for the base of my card, I had a piece of this 12 by 12. This is smooth texture cardstock, and it's pretty thin, but because I used so many layers, it turned out okay. But it's called Juneberry, and it's by Coordinations. And what I did is I cut a 6 by 12 inch piece. So by the time it was all said and done, I actually used almost this whole sheet of cardstock, but that's okay because it's a pretty special card. And then the paper pad, and this is in a plastic bag because I have used this paper pad so much that it's falling apart. But this was last year's paper pad by Fancy Pants. It's called Love Note. I believe it came in 12 by 12 and it was part of a collection, but all that I bought was the 6 by 6. And this is pretty heavy. This is 60-pound cardstock, so I guess it's not real heavy. It's fairly lightweight, but it's just such a gorgeous paper pad. I love the colors. There are pinks and reds, but they're more the vintage colors. There's paisleys in there. There's a gray, and I'll show you what I did with some of the gray because I made a mistake and I had to fix it. So and then I pulled out my Cricut Art Philosophy cartridge from Close to My Heart, and I used 2 different things on this cartridge. The first thing that I used was this ampersand on page 27, and it's in the font, and I don't know how well that's picking up because it's a shadow, it's kind of shadowy in here, but it's the ampersand, and I cut that at 3 inches. And then I cut this frame. Well, it's the frame here, the layer frame, and I cut it at 4 1/4 inches, and then I was going to cut the main part of the image in gray. But the problem that I had is I miscut it, and and I only had a piece big enough for one frame. So I miscut it and I wasn't able to use it, and so I pulled out some other gray, and it was too dark and I just didn't like the way it was. So let me show you on here. You see here where this cut out, and this was actually in the middle, so I have this other piece that I can use somewhere else. I'm not using it on this card, but you see this is the frame that it was. And so what I did, and this is the gray that actually I could even layer those up and use them for another project sometime. Very vintage looking. So what I did is I took the frame, that little edge piece, and I set it down on a scrap of the gray rather than cutting out this piece, or it would have been more like this piece. This is actually the exact piece it should have been. But rather than doing that, what I did is I set the frame on a piece of the gray that came in the paper pack, and then I just trimmed around it. So if you, and I've already adhered it to the card, but if you see the back side of where that frame ended up being, it actually was kind of a mess, but you won't see the back because of the way I adhered it to the paper. I also used these crystal stickles, and then from 3 Girl Jam I used the burlap ribbon. And this is really gorgeous ribbon. It's a little bit more rustic than what my initial plan was. I was going to actually make a bow, but now that it's all done, I'm really glad I didn't. I just think that this makes it more suitable for a man's card. So let me show you the card. Now, this is my 6x6 card, and I want to share with you some of the details of this card. You may have noticed in the scrap of this red colored paper that there were a couple of ampersands cut out. I actually cut out 3 ampersands. This one is kind of the houndstooth, and that was part of the paper collection, and I had a scrap, and so I was able to cut it on a scrap. And then I cut it 2 other times on the with the red, so that then I adhered them together to make it thicker, almost like as thick as a chipboard piece. It's not quite that thick, probably 1 or 2 more would have made it that thick. And then I adhered that down. So it's actually 3 layers here. This is that frame that I was telling you about, and then the U and the me, I used those sticker letters. You see that I have the pieces here of ribbon, and I just tucked that behind and taped it down. Now this ends up being a 6x6 inch card, and so what I did is I cut my 2 pieces of pattern paper from that collection to be 5.5 inches wide. And I thought about, just to make it easier, I thought about cutting this piece, this paisley piece, at 5.5 inches square. Because then it would be really easy to adhere this printed piece that says annual kissing booth, and it actually says open February 14th, but that's not overly noticeable. In fact, I just now saw it. It'll be fine for an anniversary card. But instead, because I didn't want to waste any of that paper, I'm going to show you a trick that I did. Let me pull aside this mat and show you how I did it. So what I did is I cut these, they're both, like this one's probably, they're both about 5.5 by 3, so that there's a little bit of an overlap. And then what I did, and I will pull, let's see, I'll pull just a piece of scratch paper here. So sorry, bear with me for a second here. So let's say that this is 5.5 inches. So I lined this up on my grid, and I put a strip of tape right here, so that then, even though this is a little bit wider than 3, but this was at 5.5 inches this way. And then what I did is I took my second piece of paper and I lined it up here so it would make a 5.5 inch square, and then I pressed down and adhered that down. That way I was only wasting just that little bit of overlap, so I was able to save my pattern paper. And that's a really good tip if you're trying to save your pattern paper. Then when I was all done, I thought, you know, it needs just a little bit of glitz. So this is where the crystal stickles came in, and I put it on my mat, not in my mat that I can paint from, and that's kind of stuff. And I grabbed a small paintbrush, just this paintbrush right here, and I squeezed out a blob of the stickles on the mat, and then I just very carefully painted around the edges with it. And then when I was all done, I thought, I think I need a little bit more. And so I smeared, using the paintbrush again, I put a thin coat of the stickles over the top of the ampersand as well, just so that I could add just that little bit of glitz. It's not over the top, and it doesn't take away from that vintage feel. So that is the front of the card. Now, if we open up the card, you'll see this is where I use those word strip stickers that I was telling you about. And I have to be careful because that's not quite dry. But I put one here that says today, and this one that says I love us. And this piece of paper is another piece from the collection of that 6x6 paper, and there's plenty of room here for me to write a little note to my husband. So now I'm going to turn over to the back side, and that is where I'm going to put this final piece, this word strip right here, and I'm just going to set that on the back just like so. And then I'm going to choose a marker. Now, what I wish I had here was a pen type Sharpie, and I don't believe that I do. I really like the way that the Sharpies write on things like this, and the reason why is because they don't smear later. You don't have to worry about them smearing as it dries. But since I don't have one, I'm going to choose, bear with me here, sorry about that. I'm going to choose one of my Zig pins, if I can find a black one here. Yeah. And this is a 0.02 or a 0.2, I'm not sure. It's very fine. And then I'll put January 1, 2014. And then up here in the corner, I'm going to put 23, because that's how many years we have. I've started on some of my things, including the dates, on my cards, if I can tuck them in a little place in case whoever the recipient is saves them. My husband actually saves all the cards that I give him. So there we have today's card, you and me, and it's an anniversary card. So thanks so much for stopping by today, and remember, take some time to enjoy the little things. Have a great day. Bye.